When somebody asks you about your history, there's two histories. There's one that you remember yourself and one of family history. Things that your family tells you about. I was told that I was so bad, instead of regular bottles, I used Heinz's ketchup bottles because when I was done with a bottle, I went out of the carriage. I threw the damn bottle overboard. And I was known from then on as the bad kid of the family, and it just never changed because I had a sister, Ruth, who got all the best marks and did everything right, and I did everything wrong.
The farthest back I can go is my mother's family. They came from Russia. I have a picture of Bubba at her daughter's wedding. She was my grandfather's mother. When I knew her, she lived with my grandmother, and she was about 101, 102. I have one little rinky-dink picture of my mother's mother. They did not have very much money.
My parents' names were Al and Fanny Bell. And incidentally, nobody called her Fanny. It was always Miss Fanny. My mother was very vain. When I was in the Army in Missouri, my mother took a train to St. Louis to spend the Passover with me. She got off the train on the arm of a lieutenant, and she introduced me as her brother. So that was Miss Fanny. My father was about 5'2" and an extremely dynamic person. He met my mother somewhere around 1916, something like that. She was probably 15 at the time, and they got married when she was 16. Her mother came over from Russia, and this is a picture of my Aunt Sylvia and my mother taken about 1899. My grandmother's first husband and my mother's father came to America. And 2 years later, he sent for them. He died probably within 2 years. So my grandmother found herself around 1907, a widower. She then started selling pretzels in the schoolyard. She saved every dime that she could, and she traded jewelry back and forth to help bring up her daughters. And the girls pulled themselves up pretty good. My mother's family came from Bialystok. Bialystok is on the border between Poland and Russia and was a very important learning center. It was founded around the 14th or 15th century. I read the history of Bialystok, and all the Jews in Bialystok were all put into the synagogue. The synagogue was surrounded, and every Jew was burned to death. So how lucky we Jews are that these people came over, how brave they were to leave their family and come here. My grandfather, Beletsky, he came over to America probably around 1880. He came from Spella, Russia. He also helped bring over families, and when families came over to America, they always had a night or two sleepover at my grandfather's house. One Jew helped another. That was the real key. And we did work. On 2 or 3 occasions, we had Jewish boys that were displaced living with us on 600 Elkins Avenue. We took them in. They stayed with us for a while until they could get on their feet. But most Jewish people helped one another whichever way they could. The most important thing in the Beletsky family was the story of the Spella Zeta. Not too long ago, this man was the head religious man in the city of Spella, Russia. From the time I was 5 years old, every year they had a Spella Zeta party to celebrate this man who was a prophet. When anybody had a problem, he would be the arbiter. He would settle the differences as a lawyer, as their counselor. We had these parties for years and years until the Depression came along and some of the family died off, and it was forgotten about until we came to these religious people who came to our house, and we now started to talk about the Spella Zeta. They wanted to find out when he was born, and what I did, I checked my grandfather's tombstone, and on the bottom of the tombstone here is the grandson of the Spella Zeta. I estimate that my grandfather was born around 1860, so the Spella Zeta had to live around 1780, 1790. Every religious child in school, first, second grade, they all told stories about the Spella Zeta. I'll tell you, the early Jewish people lived a vibrant life. They were the first people to be free, just to turn on a tap, to have a toilet to go to. And for these people to have this wonderful luxury, they loved it.
They brought their families over, but they got here first and established themselves.
They all came here and started from nothing. Ellie's grandfather came from starting a tailor shop.
My grandfather came over about 1888, something like that. Israel Bernard Cohen. He opened a little tailor shop in New Rochelle, someplace up there. After the tailor shop, my grandfather opened a store in New Rochelle. I.B. Cohen Sons, which was a very high-end store, all the very finest of men's clothing. He had 7 children, had 6 sons and a daughter. So when he started to make money, he decided that some of them should have their own business. So he bought a coal yard in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And the older son was David. He went up there to Bridgeport and the business was just about to fold. My father said he could run it. This was when my father was 16. Morton Maurice Cohen. He went to Bridgeport and really made a big thing of it. Then came the war, World War I, and he joined the Navy. The coal business was down the drain during the war. The government took over all of those things. After he got out, my father decided to go to New York, and since my grandfather was in the men's clothing business, he opened a business called Northern Pants Company on University Place. And when he got there, the accountant that was running the place was my mother. So that was it. They got married. The Cohen family was not too happy about it. My father's family was quite wealthy. So therefore, when my father brought her home, they didn't think that my mother was good enough. Good enough, that means no money. I had to hear that all of my life. My mother's name before she met my father was Sarah. He didn't like Sarah, so he called her Shirley. And Shirley is what it was for the rest of her life. She was always a very fine businesswoman. Later on in life, when my father and my mother opened a manufacturing in Philadelphia, my mother was very conscious of the fact that women were not supposed to hold those kind of positions. She never signed her name Shirley Cohen. It was always S. Cohen. So nobody would know she was a woman. So that's what those days were like.
One of the great people in our family was Ellie's mother. She was a diplomat. She was just good in every way, and she gave more than she took. In fact, she gave of herself to make sure that everything went right with the family, because Morton was a man of highs and lows and a difficult person.
He was a tough cookie.
My parents just wanted to make their bucks and have a good time and laugh and play cards and go to the track. My parents went to Florida on vacation and never got sunburned. They went to the hotel, they played cards in the morning, they went to the horse races in the afternoon, and they went to dogs at night. At the end of the race, my father would always say, "That horse just ran a little bit faster, I would have won."
And my parents were the exact opposite. Absolutely, they did not gamble, they did not drink. We weren't flamboyant people. It was a little difficult. In fact, for me it was. When I got into this family, all the in-laws played cards, all the girls. I didn't know the first thing about it. They played canasta, they played bridge, whatever. They had to teach me because I knew nothing at all.
My father was a salesman for Right Style Model Cap Company, and he made so much in commission, they made him a partner.
My mother gardened. That was her relaxation. And she worked. She was at that factory all the time. So if she could escape for an afternoon and we could go shopping, it was a big thing.
My mother had a summer home in Fitzwater Street. That's in South Philadelphia. The summer home was that on the summertime, everybody opened their windows and they slept on the fire escape. Now, you slept on the fire escape, you ate on the fire escape, and at night, up and down the fire escape, you had sex, whoever wanted to have sex. And that's the way my mother, that's one of the memories that my mother had. But that was my mother's summer home, and that's the way it was air conditioned. My father was in the cap business. He was successful until the Depression came along. When I was born, my father wrote on his business card my name in English and my name in Hebrew and the 7.5 pounds that I weighed. We struggled during the Depression like anybody that you would talk to. I found a $10 bill one time, and it took me 2 weeks to the Boy Scout camp. $5 a week. I went to the Boy Scout camp, the greatest find that I ever had. Outside of that, I had a normal boyhood with my bike. We lived in Glenside, and we had an excellent family relationship.
When I was 6 months old, my father got involved with a family by the name of Hamburger Brothers, who were selling their coal yard. So we came to Philadelphia. We lived in part of Philadelphia called Logan. So he had that coal yard for quite a few years, till the Second World War came up, and that ruined the coal yard. And he went into the Lovely Lady Comfort Company.
Naturally, having any manufacturing during the war, he was extremely successful. And it came to a point where Morton just said, I can't run the business myself anymore. You two boys come in and you'll be part of Lovely Lady Comfort Company. And Alvin, Ellie's brother, and I ran the company until 1993, 1994, something like that.
My brother, Alvin, was 16 months younger than I. He was a really good guy. Always ahead of something. He had loads of friends from college, from high school. He was very sick when he got older, and he died 2002, I suppose. My sister Doris was the most exuberant, the most vivacious, the most adorable kid. She was only 4 feet 10 and weighed, on a good day, 80 pounds. She was the life of every party. And she died in 2001 from lung cancer. My mother's family, I know very little about. The closeness was all with the Cohens, naturally, because my father took us there all the time. We would get in that car, and I got car sick every time, and we would have to drive to New Rochelle. My grandfather was really a very generous, warm, nice guy. My grandmother, I don't know too much about. I think her maiden name was Ginsburg. I lived with them for about 3 or 4 months when I was 6, 7 years old. My brother had scarlet fever. The house was in quarantine, so my parents took me to my grandparents' house. So we used to take walks together, and he taught me how to throw the rocks into the water. I guess because my grandfather spoke English, I got closer to him, because I didn't know what my grandmother was talking about, except when she told me to go to bed. My grandfather became very, very successful in New Rochelle.
He was a millionaire then when there were no millionaires.
When I used to go to New Rochelle, the one sister, the tough guy, she would point out the properties that my grandfather owned. We own this, we own that, we own this. They traveled to Israel many times. He was one of the early supporters, except it wasn't called Israel, it was called Palestine. He and 2 other men built the synagogue in New Rochelle, New York. When he died, he made all kinds of headlines in the New Rochelle paper. He died December 14th, 1940, just when my brother was going to be bar mitzvahed. So that was a very small bar mitzvah.
When I was 18 years old, I left school and I went to night school for a while. During the day, I tried to work as a salesman. I desperately wanted to be a successful salesman. When I first started with Champ Hats, I had all the small towns from Virginia to Florida driving there in a 1933 Ford in the summertime. Yeah, and I have 2 handkerchiefs to hold the wheel when you went into the car because you couldn't put your hands on the wheel. And then came December 7th, 1942. Everybody that lived at that time, it changed your life completely. My mother and father looked at each other and knew what was going to happen. I went to Chamberlain's aircraft school, which gave me 9 months to study code. Time was a precious thing in those days. Time when I wasn't closer to the front lines. The wartime was heavy time. You're only taught to kill. And the idea of living and dying is what decision you made. When you graduated from radio school, you had 2 choices. To go to the Air Corps, which I could have been right close to home, or go to that godforsaken place in Joplin, Missouri, in the Army. And I wanted to go to the Air Corps in the worst way. My mother says, no Air Corps. You're going to the Army. A friend of mine chose the Air Corps. He was on his 2nd mission as a radio operator. The bomb bay doors opened. A shell hit the load of bombs that was in there, and the entire plane disintegrated. And it just, wartime, it was just that way. You read which friend of yours was killed, which friend of yours wasn't killed. I was fortunate enough I went into the Army, I became an instructor, and that kept me away from the fighting. I wound up in the Army of Occupation in Japan, and I became a radio operator. This was just a couple months after the war. I came after the kamikazes. I just missed everything. The atomic bomb was just detonated, and I was stationed in a little place, Kumagai, Japan. Everything was devastated. The town was flattened, except the geisha house. That didn't have a mark on it. Amazing. I know. And I'll tell you, the day I came home was one of the greatest days of my life. When I left to go in the Army, I said to my mother, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. And I got on that platform when I came back, and I hugged my mother, and I said, see, I came back. Oh boy, it was one of the greatest times of my life. I'll be a son of a gun. After all these years, it's still so ingrained. That's because it made an impression. After the war, I came back. My job was waiting for me. And we had now a very important facet of our lives. The Mildred and Fanny Hat Shop. It was one of the fine shops in Philadelphia, but it was also the fine gathering place for all the Jewish people. And for the high holidays, they bought their hats at the Mildred and Fanny shop. In fact, Eleanor bought her hats at the Mildred and Fanny shop.
Miss Fanny and Miss Mildred, her sister, were very interested in people that had money.
My mother and my aunt, they did nothing but get me blind dates and blind dates. I said, I'm tired of blind dates. Just find me a nice girl I could marry.
So when I went in, their little ears perked up.
My mother says, I got the girl for you. My aunt says, I got the girl for you. I called her up. Unfortunately, I did one dumb thing. And I asked her if she could cook, and she said yes.
First telephone call.
Can you cook? Because my mother couldn't cook.
Stupid, I said yes. We only dated about 6 times before we got engaged. It happened real fast. When he was home, he traveled 6 weeks at a time. So each time after we sort of got together, he went on another 6-week trip.
I proposed to you in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I asked you to marry me, and all you did was ask for a cigarette. You never answered me.
I never smoked a cigarette in my life. We didn't know each other. We really didn't. We had no business getting married.
Our early marriage was a little shaky for the first year or so. In fact, Ellie and I, when we got on our honeymoon, we both decided, what the hell are we doing here? I never wanted to get married in the first place. Ellie says, I don't know why I got married. This is the truth.
And we had to go from Philadelphia to Miami, and then from Miami over to Havana. It was right after the war. We were in a troop carrier.
Bucket seats at DC-3.
Oh, what a terrible ride that was. We were supposed to stay at this very, very...
Hotel National.
We had reservations in the National. When we arrived at the airport, they came running out to say, you can't stay at the hotel, they're all on strike. So we walked around Havana a little bit, and fortunately, Herbert's mother had a friend that owned a hotel in the heart of Florida. We got on a plane and went to Miami, and that's where we spent our honeymoon.
And from there we built up. We decided we'd be honest with each other from here on in. But we fell in love. I fell in love.
Took you a while.
How about you?
A little longer.
But we've had a loving, enjoyable relationship for 57 years. We're lucky kids. We are lucky. And I love you.
Good.
Still.